Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
Hello, Sixers, and welcome back to another episode of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. This is episode 76, and today is February 1st, 2021. I'm Bill, and I'm joined, as always, by my competitive co-hosts, Amy and Jordan. Welcome, guys.
I am
Welcome.
not the competitive one usually.
I am here to win
That's
today's
okay.
podcast.
That's Jordan. All right. Before we get started, we do want to remind our listeners that the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is not a spoiler-free podcast. That means if there's something in the Cosmere you haven't read and you're worried about hearing spoilers, you might want to go read those first, then come back and join the discussion. There are actually one or two things that we'll be talking about that dip into other parts of the Cosmere, so that could happen tonight. Tonight, we will be continuing our discussion of Rhythm of War, focusing on Venli and Eshonai's plot lines and flashbacks. For those of you who listen to the podcast recordings or watch the videos on YouTube, we do want to remind you that it's possible for our listeners to interact with us live via chat as we record each episode at www.twitch.tv/InkeepersTable. We record episodes of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies every other Monday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, so please join us, take an active part of the discussion. The Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is made possible by the support of our listeners and patrons. The show will, of course, continue to be free, but if you want to help us out, you can head on over to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. Even pledging a couple dollars per episode really helps us out as we work to improve the show. Our patrons get immediate access to our Discord channel where you can talk about the show and the Cosmere with other listeners. It's a great community. We've got a lot of amazing discussions, and you also get early access to bonus episodes, exclusive access to other bonus content, and other good stuff. This week in particular, we want to thank three new patrons, Dan D, Danielle L, and James. Just
I was
James.
hoping for another Dan-based name. It just would have been three of a kind. It would have been awesome. Have we had three before, though?
I don't know if we've had three at once.
I don't know if we have or not. I'm not sure.
No, it's pretty awesome. Thank you.
It is.
Yep, thank y'all. Y'all are amazing, and seriously, you just help us keep doing this, and we really appreciate it.
You are the wind beneath our wings.
Jordan,
You are the wind
what'll it take to
beneath
get you to sing the
my
whole song?
wings.
Apparently a list of lyrics and me not knowing that's a song. I thought that was
Wind
just
beneath my wings.
I just thought that
You
was a
didn't
phrase.
Oh my
No.
gosh, no, that's a
It's
song.
a song. You got to show him the light later.
That's
Bill.
Bette
You gotta-
Midler, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not
it's
exactly
Bette Midler.
familiar with
Right,
Bette Midler's
but I don't
catalog,
remember.
actually.
Is it
I'm just saying, it's been around since forever.
Well, no, it was something
thought
my
it-
dad would
thought
say
it
to
was
me
Mariah
sometimes
Carey,
when,
but-
like, I handed him a tool. He would just say,
He's
it.
probably referencing the song.
Yeah, well, I just thought it was some phrase because he said it.
It is Bette Midler. Good job, Bill. It is Bette Midler.
That's what I thought. Okay, so guys, we're talking about Venli and Eshonai. Now, the thing I found interesting about this is, like, in all the previous books, you have the flashback character who the book is essentially their book, right? You know, the first one you've got Kaladin, then we've got Shallan and Dalinar. In this book, Venli and Eshonai are the flashback characters, but it doesn't feel like the rest of the book is really theirs.
Yeah, they feel.
Would you agree, or is that
Yeah.
just me?
Venli very much feels like an observer to a lot of things, but it makes
Like-
sense with her position that she can't do a ton.
Uh-huh.
But it's still,
I personally feel like this is almost more of a Navani's book. And then the flashbacks are Venli's and Eshonai's.
It
Yeah.
is, because Venli is a passenger. She's not the active character in the story, and her character development is her learning to actually stand for something.
Right.
Yeah.
Because in the past, she only served herself.
Yeah, and she kind of fell for a lot of things. So.
Yeah, she went through. She has a very interesting arc in the flashbacks. Although I also thought it was interesting. The flashbacks don't start until part 3.
Yeah.
That's chapter 45.
Took a while.
Yeah.
And so...
No, it was interesting.
Elliot in chat mentioned, she says, it seems more like Navani's book to me, but I wasn't mad. I love Navani. That's true, because Navani's story was amazing. Yeah. Well, and that's not anything against Venli and Eshonai, because their backstory, like, I learned a lot more from their flashbacks than I expected to.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of their flashbacks are essentially, we kind of got what they're flashing back to in the first and second book. But we got a very interesting new perspective on it. So,
yeah,
we got a lot of new stuff anyway.
And this is to be expected as well. I mean, if you I'm willing to bet if you broke down each book, I bet the first book had a lot more Kaladin in it than the second book had Shallan in it, than the third book had Dalinar in it. Just because,
I don't know about that.
Because as the book gets older, the series gets older. We're getting more and more viewpoint characters that all need their time to sort of breathe. And Shallan's book, definitely Kaladin had almost as much as Shallan did outside of the viewpoint chapters. Like Kaladin had a huge arc in that book. And
but so did Shallan.
Yeah, but if you look, it's just one of those. I bet if you look at it, you'd be surprised at how much it has dwindled. It's just this is the first time. It's been mostly a series of 3 characters books. It's mostly been Kaladin, Shallan, Dalinar, and this is the first time we've really delved outside of the trio. And but the trio still have a lot that they have to do, and so I think it's just a simple matter of this is just the way it was eventually going to go.
Yeah, that said, I suspect that book 5 is going to have a lot more Szeth in it than this had Venli, and so I feel like there was a lot less Venli in this book than in any of the other 3.
Well, and
than any of the 3 main characters.
Well, and the stuff that Szeth was up to is definitely more important to the overall plot than the stuff Venli was up to. We already knew a lot, there wasn't a ton of reveals from Venli's flashback chapters.
Yeah, it just, you saw inside her head better compared to her just seeming like
and we also found out
rat,
we also found out sort of why Venli started going down the path that she was on.
Yeah, you got in her head a lot more compared to you just got it from Eshonai's perspective, and siblings don't always understand why that and other things.
Not just in her head, though. Venli was very, very much manipulated.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
They played her like they made her dance like a puppet.
In that, she's actually has a lot more in common with Dalinar in her past than she does any other character. Because Dalinar was being used as a cosmic pinball between the forces of Odium and endowment.
No,
cultivation. Sorry, wrong goddess. And because Dalinar made some horrible choices, but a ton of them were under the influence of the thrill, and we now know that Odium was shaping him for this. But the thing is, Odium was shaping Dalinar for this grand purpose in his mind. They were just straight up using Venli and were just throwing her away.
Yeah, she got discarded essentially after the, at the Battle of Thalen Field. And then Leshwi just said, "Hey, mine." And but
you like it's and the other thing about her is her part of her is she does feel less interesting, I think, because she feels so mundane. Like the things she's struggling with are things that you and I struggle with. She's prideful, she's jealous. She has these grandiose designs in her head when really anything she does is because she's standing on the shoulders of giants.
I like the way you worded that because it has 2 meanings. She feels so mundane to us and to herself.
Yeah.
Because, she keeps seeing Eshonai going off and exploring, and then Eshonai, gets to take on war form first, and then she gets to take on storm form first, and Venli keeps getting... And it's just... Because it's really interesting because Venli is so ambitious, she ends up being held back a bit. Eshonai really doesn't have these ambitions of being great. She just wants to see. She wants to figure out what's beyond the next hill. Yeah. And ends up, getting raised up. And Venli's just like, but I'm trying so hard to be raised up. And it's just like, well, that's kind of the point.
Well, and it's also, it kind of has a lot of parallels to real life because, we go to school and teachers tell you to, be quiet, obey the rules and do all the stuff that, they say will help you out later on. The reality is the person who tends to make the biggest splash tends to be the ones that actually do more in life because they learn to take risks, and people who learn to take risks are the ones who tend to make bigger contributions to the world. And Venli she was a good girl. She did what her mom told her. She took no risks.
She took care of mom. She was learning the family trade,
Meanwhile, Eshonai was being risky. And so she was changing the world, and that's got a sting for the poor girl who's sitting here. She's been
doing her duty.
Yeah, and she just realizes this hasn't gotten me anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then over the course of the future, technically over the course of the previous 3 books, before the flashbacks, over the course of present day story, their roles have kind of reversed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Venli becomes, this ambitious scholar, and she's looking for the new forms. Essentially, once Venli starts working with Ulam, their roles kind of switch. Eshonai starts sort of doing the more dutiful thing, taking care of their mother, standing on the council, and just sort of being more cautious. And Venli starts becoming reckless.
Well, Eshonai got that huge wake-up call with her conversation with Gavilar.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, no, we didn't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know the powers they mess with.
Well, and it's also scary. Just, we know nothing. It's just absolutely fascinating watching this, because they're talking about how, essentially, the world is so small to them because they know nothing beyond essentially the shattered planes.
Mm-hmm. And even before that,
No, I'm sorry. I'm mixing up her conversation, or the conversation with Dalinar. Sorry, sorry. You said her conversation with Gavilar. You're talking about at the banquet.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes more sense.
I jumped to the side of the banquet.
During the banquet.
Yeah, during the banquet.
Yeah, because because Eshonai left and was pretending. Oh, I don't know how I got here. And he's like, yeah, I know you speak the language, so why don't you come here? I got something cool to show you.
It'll
and it's
great.
like, he's just like, hey, do you want a hit of anti-Stormlight or whatever this is?
Yep. Okay, so Eshonai is the one who's out exploring, and she's the one who meets the humans, that sort of discovers these new people and brings them back. And of course, everybody's like, hey, look how cool Eshonai is. Let's raise her up. Venli gets jealous. Because meanwhile, Venli's been staying home and learning the songs with her mother, who is essentially the keeper of the songs for, and I've said essentially several times tonight, and I apologize for that. But the keeper of the songs for their family. And Venli is her apprentice, learning so that she can preserve them afterwards. And of course, as she's listening to these songs, Venli becomes more and more curious about the forms that they're talking about. She's like, well, why don't we go get those? She's like, how can you expect me to sing these songs over and over and over about the forms and not be curious about them?
Yeah.
And it's a fair question.
It's a really interesting question. And so what we learn in these flashbacks is a lot about listener society.
Yeah.
They have these small tribes that have these simple battles against each other. They take over cities back and forth from each other. And
there's not usually much collateral damage other than material. People don't usually die in them.
Right.
No, and that was very typical of of wars between native tribes, even going back, like it doesn't matter what culture you go to, it tends to be true, because people matter much more to that society than they do now.
Well, it's a small group, and so
Yeah.
any loss is devastating.
Huge. Yeah.
And so it's actually kind of similar. It brings some context to what's going on between Leshwi and Kaladin and the Windrunners.
Yeah.
Where, where Kaladin pulls back. And he was like, surrender, you're out of the fight. And there's actually a strong parallel there. And I think that kind of stands out to Leshwi. Which is why she sort of silently agreed to this
balance of
this deal, this unspoken deal that they have. The thing that is really interesting, though, is before this, we didn't know that the listeners were divided up into smaller tribes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because as far as we've known, they've just been one giant group of people. Mm-hmm. And they only came together when they met the humans.
Yep.
And suddenly they realize, holy cow, if we don't band together, we're going to get destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember who it was that realized, sort of like, just like, someone over there is going to decide that they'll need to conquer us for our own good.
Mm-hmm.
Who was that? I tried to remember who that was. Someone said that, and it was just sort of like, yep.
Yeah, I don't remember.
That'll definitely occur.
I feel like it was one of the sisters, Venli or Eshonai, but I don't remember which one.
Mm-hmm.
But if we got it wrong, feel free to tell us.
Okay.
We don't remember.
Can we talk about an interesting character?
Sure.
Axendweth.
I'd forgotten.
The first time we meet her, that name stands out very distinctly because it does not sound like an Alethi name. That sounds like a Terrace name.
Oh, interesting.
It does.
You think that...
And...
he's sneaking world hoppers into a...
Well, and we noticed that, Venli notices she had, 5 rings on her fingers, and it just seemed very impractical. I'm just like, that sounds a whole lot like a Feruchemist. And she's also very good at languages. Well, we know that Feruchemy can be used to store connection, which you can use then to
translate, to talk to people.
To translate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely on purpose. He's definitely winking and nodding at us.
But the thing is, she's the one who gave Venli the original gemstone that had Ulim in it, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, okay, so we got a world hopper coming in and messing with everything on Roshar.
So we don't know. We don't know if she's part of the Ghost Bloods, right? We don't, because I'm not sure if that.
Well, we know that she was working with the Sons of Honor.
Yeah.
Sons of Honor. Okay.
Because there was another of her kind, who turned Gavilar against her, who basically tipped him off that she was doing stuff. I'm guessing this is the same Feruchemist who was close to Dalinar, the one that ended up getting killed by the Ghost Bloods.
Yeah.
The one that had the red chicken that Lift adopted.
Yes.
That is clearly an insertion of Brandon's bird into the story.
What?
Yes.
An author wouldn't do that, would
No.
Oh, Brandon does it all the time.
All the time.
And okay, and then let's talk a little bit about Ulim too. Because Ulim's a little
He's a
little punk
salesman.
I want.
He's a little punk.
Yeah, I want to smush him like a bug.
Like, you want to flick his ear and say, "No, bad. Go sit in a corner."
You're gonna sit in your jar until you behave.
But it's interesting that they go after the singers in this way, because in some ways they are easier to manipulate because the nature of the rhythms.
You mean the listeners?
The listeners, sorry, yeah. I always do the wrong one. But the very nature of how they can sing to the rhythms makes them more open in a way that the humans aren't, because the humans always have to hide their their emotions because that's just how they exist. It's not an option to do anything else.
And so they're naturally more skeptical.
Yeah. And so she, like, his form of manipulation is so mundane, really. Like, the things he's like, oh, you're going to be so great, Venli. It's just like, this is how I manipulate a child.
This is great.
And that's how he views it, too. Mm-hmm. That he's dealing with children.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just sort of gets away with this crap. And I'm sure he's utterly bemused by it and thinks it's, hilarious that they fall for it, but it's just, it feels so dirty.
Yeah, I mean, compared to human society, the listener society was much more simple. There was much less deception going on and all of that. So it's easier for Ulam to do that because they just had a more honest society.
Well, it's like you look, and even when they get war form, they go out and do they conquer them? No. They go out and they're just like, look at how awesome this is. Come be awesome with us. And that's their entire sales pitch. Whereas when Dalinar tries a pitch like that, it's, look at how awesome I am. If I wanted to kill you, I could. Now shut up and get in line.
I love how he just Dalinar just sort of assumed, this is again Oathbringer stuff, but
yeah,
just, Dalinar's just like, okay, you're part of my team now. And the guy's just like, Dalinar's just like, you're not going to say no. Like, he just, nobody says no to me. Come on.
It's like,
let's
yeah,
go.
sure, whatever. You tried to kill me, but whatever. You're part of my team now. Just, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just, there's a bit of a difference because both are very open and honest about it, but there's, because with Dalinar, there's the threat of violence. There wasn't, like, the threat was, you can't beat us, so why don't you, like, well, heck, even their war games, there's like this order of, oh, you're going to throw some spears, and then we're going to throw some spears. We discussed this last time, where war has to have these accepted rules, or else it becomes savagery. And their rules are very regimented for war. And they're just like, guys, rules don't matter anymore. Come on, we gotta do something different.
Yeah.
And it was so honest. And I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
I don't know. It's a problem.
Yeah. It's really, yeah, absolutely. So, talking about Ulam again, though, it's really interesting the way that he kind of gets in Venli's head. Because it's very, very slow. Because like, Venli feels like she's making her own decisions the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, because for, they have to willingly accept these Voidsprint into their gem hearts, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole concept of a vampire. They can't come in unless invited. Mm-hmm. And so he just sort of convinces her, he's like, oh, this isn't a big deal. And gradually he just sort of twists her thinking. Mm-hmm. Until it's one of those things where, like, if you look at point A and point B, and if you're at point A, you're like, how could I ever get there?
Yeah.
But she's just sort of slowly gone down this path. And I think that's kind of the difference between Venli and Eshonai. Because, Eshonai, she brought in the, she took on storm form, but there was always a part of her that was kind of screaming against it. And I think that's kind of the difference between them, is because Venli so gradually went down that path, and her ambition kind of blinded her to what direction she was going.
And she had Ulam like whispering in her ear the whole time to try and, smooth everything over and feed into her ego.
Yeah, well, Eshonai, she was Eshonai, and then she had storm form, and there's a part of her that's just like, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right, because she jumped jumped directly into it. And that's sort of, I think, why she was able to fight the way that she was. While Venli didn't even think there was a reason to fight.
Well, and more importantly, Venli was being given the delusions of grandeur. Like, if you remember at the beginning of Oathbringer, I want to say it was, where she said, she said to one of the, I think it might have been Ulam, but someone else, just like, I will be a queen, you know. And she said these things, and now she's essentially just Leshwi's lady in waiting is all she is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just very
Well, to the point where she is given to Raboniel.
yeah.
Yep.
Like, you know, it wasn't, hey, Venli, you want to come be mine? No. It's, hey, Leshwi, I'm taking your voice.
Yep.
And so it's just like, you know, suddenly she really is essentially a slave.
Yeah.
And it's part
Which
of
all the
why
listeners have
she
turned
In all but name.
yeah, it's part of why she starts questioning. She
little
realizes
rebellion.
these aren't I didn't get what I was promised here, and it makes you start questioning.
Yeah.
Even if it's not coming from the so-called, you know, righteous path or anything. She starts to question it of, why am I saying yes to this?
Right.
I had grander plans here.
Yeah.
And then she realizes, oh, I've been duped.
And
No,
it's too late to get out easily.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And of course, you also have Ulan playing on this sibling rivalry that Eshonai and Venli have got.
Yeah.
You know, like, they're sisters. They care about each other. But there's clear competition going on between them, especially on Venli's side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she notices so many times, she's like, I'm not like Eshonai. You know, Eshonai is able to do all this stuff. Actually, it was really interesting. I feel like Brandon took a little bit of a cue from Robert Jordan here. This isn't spoiler stuff, but you have three main guys in the Wheel of Time books, and so many times they keep commenting on, you know, I can't talk to girls like Matt can, or, you know, I'm not as confident like this guy, and they're constantly comparing themselves to each other, and each of them looks like they all think that the others are better at speaking to women than they are, for example. You know, they're all like you know, Rand compares himself to Matt and Perrin, Matt compares himself to Rand and Perrin, you know, and it's just sort of, you know, and so you have that, and I think we saw a little bit of that here because Eshonai and Venli sort of say, oh, I wish I had this capability that Venli has, or I wish I had this capability that Eshonai has. And I feel like Brandon kind of took a cue from Robert Jordan on that, just it played in a similar way. But, you know, little events, for example, Venli finds Warform, and Eshonai gets to try it first.
Yep.
Which echoes back to, you know, in the earlier books, Venli discovers Stormform, and Eshonai tries it first. And it just sort of brings a new context to that, because she's like, no, I get to do it first.
I found it. I want it.
Well,
I
it's the problem of she's too valuable. Like, what if something goes wrong? We can't let you do it first. Then we can't
You're
get
not
more
expendable.
forms.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, wait, dang it.
But I wanted to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
getting-
And so it's kind of playing on the same early dutiful aspect of Venli. She's like, I'll do what I'm supposed to do. You know, and even when she's doing stuff against the listener's best interests, she thinks she's doing it in their best interests.
She convinces herself that's what it
Yes.
is.
Yep. She rationalizes it.
Fair enough. Yes.
And
But she convinces herself pretty well.
yeah, well, and then she finally does have that moment where she admits to herself, no, I'm not doing
I've
this for
doomed
my
us
mother.
all.
I'm not doing this for my mother. I'm doing this for me. And she just sort of accepts that that's, you know, she finally admits that that's the truth.
Right.
And it's kind of scary because now she's sort of given herself license to keep down
Yeah.
this path.
Essentially, she's acknowledged that that's why she's been doing it, and so now there's no reason to pretend it's not.
Yeah, it's awful. But at the same time, so understandable. There's nothing unrealistic about it. And that's I know a lot of people find her chapters to not be that interesting, and I think it's just because of how relatable she is. This is someone who absolutely is one of us and can be easily, just as we can be easily manipulated, so can they.
Right.
And so in that regard, she's not as fun as everyone else because, this is, I don't like how close to reality this is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It's an interesting look because, again, it's one of those things we've seen her. This is nothing new. We knew that she was, sort of manipulated. We knew that she couldn't be trusted completely. And we just now have the background behind it. We now have the full picture of, and we see that she wasn't as horrible as we want to believe. It's sort of like looking back at atrocities from, people are just like, oh, I would never have done that. I would have stood up. And it's like, but in all honesty, when have you, just as a person, like look inward and you say, when have you ever stood up against what was popular to your own detriment? And most people can't think of a very good reason or a time where they actually did that. And it's because it's hard. It's really hard to stand up to what the prevailing theories and, what everyone else is doing. And for that reason, it's like, no, you probably would have done the same thing. And Eshonai is Venli's a cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm.
She's a tale.
It's like the saying, everyone is the hero of their own story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hers is a small tragedy, but she starts to pull herself out of it.
Mm-hmm. And, and that's sort of what her plot line is during over the course of this book. Mm-hmm. That's what her modern plot line really is her trying to redeem herself.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point where at one point, she is the first time we have had somebody speak an oath and have the response, these words are not accepted.
Yeah.
Because this is sort of her journey to the point where those words can be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
When it was interesting when she's like, what? But I'm trying to do the thing. And then she realizes, oh, I'm swearing an oath to talk about, people being free. And yet I know a girl who's just trapped in a cage and I did jack squat about it.
And I'm just letting it happen.
Yeah, I'm a hypocrite.
Well, and it's how horrifying is the realization at that point, because now she's like, oh no, I have to do something about it.
I don't have a choice. I can't keep ignoring it.
Yeah. Okay, so modern day, we talked about Raboniel during Navani's episode, but I kind of love that Leshwi, when they're having the meeting with the Nine, and first off, the Nine are creepy as all get out because they're sealed in stone, and it's just all sorts of messed up and feels...
Ooh, yeah.
And it's just intentionally, I think, by Brandon feels very alien. And then creepy Nightcrawler, or Lezion the Pursuer, comes in calling dibs on killing Kaladin. Leshwi steps in and says she has an earlier claim. But before that, she'd mentioned to Venli, she's like, I've got a bad feeling. Something's going to happen. She's got this just intuitive feeling that something bad's going to happen. And then Lezion shows up and it freaks everybody out. And Leshwi's just like, that wasn't it. And then Raboniel comes in and it's just like, oh no. And it's just sort of she wasn't scared about Lezion, who we've seen what he's capable of, but she's scared of this woman. That is a perfect way to set the stage for who Raboniel is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I like that Leshwi understands what she is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, she respects her and is fearful of her at the same time.
Yeah, it's always fun to see the big bads who are not like, I'm just gonna punch you, but they manipulate and twist and tweak everything and just do that.
Oh, Raboniel is one of my favorite characters that Brandon's put in. I think that her whole arc, all of her interactions with Navani were amazing. And her interactions with Venli as well, because you can tell she kind of knows something's up with Venli, but she doesn't know what.
I'm trying to think of it. I feel like it's like something. It's like the person who's up to something has a feeling when someone else is up to something.
Uh-huh.
And she doesn't press on it because that'd be rude. It'd be rude to sit here and ask about it directly. That's not how you do this. Come on.
No.
We're civilized people. We have to go about it in obtuse ways. But the thing is, it does highlight Venli feeling like she doesn't have much agency in it, and that's another part of the growth that she has as a character is she has to recognize that she has more agency than she realizes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of part of the reason that this didn't feel as much like Venli's book is because she spent so much of it just being acted upon.
Yeah, she was very passive in a lot of her actions, and that she was being this person's servant, and she's doing what they want. She's being this person's servant and just observing a lot of things.
And I'm not saying that as a criticism of the book. I think that's sort of an explanation. Her arc is very important, and we get a lot from her perspective, but she isn't an active character for the majority of the book. Most of it, she's sitting back, she's watching, she's got her own stuff going on, and so she's like, not taking part in a lot of what's happening because
she's also trying not to rock the boat because she's trying to have her group sneak out. So if she makes a big stink and gets a lot of focus, then that will mess that plan up. So there is also that reason that I just now remember that I'm like, yeah, she wouldn't want to make a big
it's not about it's not like she has no reason to stay
absolutely
quiet.
Well, I mean, she's a Knight Radiant inside of the fortress held by the enemies of the Knights Radiant.
Yeah,
she's got to be real careful.
One does not simply rebel casually. But
I love that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I love that the whole time, Tamber is pushing her. She's like, you need to reveal who you are. Tell Leshwi that you've got this.
That would have been so interesting if she had done it earlier. You almost
it
wonder
would be fascinating.
What would have happened. Like, I don't think it would have had huge changes for things, but I think it would have changed a lot of stuff for how Venli went through it. I wonder if Leshwi would have found ways to get her sequestered off enough so she could practice her powers more, or even just, I don't know.
That said, I don't know if Leshwi was in the right state of mind earlier on, where if Venli had told her about it, she would have taken the steps that she did. Because remember, she told her right after they've seen this amazing show of resistance from Kaladin, and the pursuer, like, basically cheating to catch him, and Kaladin just does not give up. And finally, after all this stuff where she holds back the heavenly ones. And Venli's just like, okay, fine. I got to tell you something. It's like at this point, this is where Leshwi is in the right state of mind to say it's worth stepping up and standing, taking a stand.
Yeah.
Oh, but I love the part of it I do love about that though is the fact that she even Leshwi was sort of like maybe we don't have to, and it's just sort of like really you think that Odium's gonna just sort of be cool with the fact that you just sort of stood back, did nothing, and it's just sort of like nah, you're probably right.
Right. That's it. I love the moment when Leshwi finds out that she's bonded a Spren. Mm-hmm. Just because she's like,
she's exuberant about it.
I love that, Venli's just like, oh no, she's furious. And she's weeping in joy. She's like, they've forgiven us.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of an incredibly emotional thing. She's like, I had a friend that I loved dearly and lost her, centuries ago. Because her or him, I can't remember but
I can't remember. Yeah.
but lost this dear friend ages ago because of things that we did. And she's been holding on to this regret for that long. And so for her to realize there is redemption, there is a future. I am not this, this regret doesn't have to be permanent. That can come back from this. Like, that's the kind of relief that just, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
And so it's just really cool seeing Leshwi's response to all this.
Well, the other thing that's so cool about it is, one, the fact that we're dealing with creatures so old that they remember when the Spren were on their side.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not a perspective we're going to get a whole lot of. That's somewhat a rare thing.
Right.
But the other thing is just the fact that not only is she rejoicing over it, she does do something about it. I mean, given her position, this isn't an easy decision to make. It's in fact rather terrifying to make this decision, because Odium is not going to be pleased. He's gonna have a thing to say. Well,
right.
Now we don't know how much of now he does, but that's for a different day.
Oh gosh.
But he is, like, this is a terrifying step to take, but she does take it. And I find it very interesting that when Leshwi takes this step, it's because of Venli, and Venli was sitting there the entire time thinking, what happens when I finally, just she's waiting for the House of Cards to come crumbling down on her. And then she finds out, oh, no, she's okay with it. She gets it. She understands. And it's...
But again, the timing of that revelation, I think, was important.
It definitely was, but it's all... I think it's another metaphor for, we do that as humans. We make things out to be more terrifying than they really are.
We dread things, yeah. There's so many things that I dread doing, and then I finally suck it up and do it, and it's like, oh, that was it?
Well, it's like, if you knew everything about me, you would reject me, you would shun me, and they find out your deep, dark secret, and they still... They don't shun you. It's just like, oh, that's sort of how anxiety works. Like, it's just, there are these fears that people are going to respond in certain ways, and you start imagining these worst case scenarios. And when that's one of the ways that, one of the coping mechanisms is, let the bad thing happen, and you'll see it's not as bad as you thought it would be. Like, that's one of the ways that you actually fight against anxiety.
Yeah. And that's a thing that, again, I mean, how many times we've said it, Brandon is so good at capturing the essence of these concepts. And it just blows me away every single time we say it, and then he does it again somehow.
In a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I read a post today. I read a post today talking about Syl's an interlude, where they compared it to ADD, and they were actually very, very touched that they had this sort of recognition, like that Brandon had seen this, talking about the childish brain and the adult brain, and realizing that she's not controlled by either brain, she's herself. And it's just like, it was just sort of one of those, I'd never even made that connection before, but it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so Vinley tells Leshui about her being a Radiant, and she also tells her something that she's discovered, which she's very excited about, and that's that the other listeners, including her mother and them, like the group that left with her mother, are still alive. Now, I can't remember how she figures this out.
There's a map or something that she finds or is given, and I can't remember if it's Raboniel or if it's Leshui that gives it to her.
They found it in one of the stores or something.
Oh, that's right. It's just as they're ransacking Urithiru.
Oh, yeah. I just remember it was on paper of some kind.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't remember where they'd gotten it, but and she's ecstatic about it because that's huge. Because we as readers didn't know what had happened to that group either. We assumed that they died out there somewhere or something.
I mean, I had assumed they had gotten away.
I didn't know. I mean, there'd been no word either way. I figured
Yeah.
they'd lost a number of them because I figured it would end up being a smaller group because there's, high storms
With
and everything else.
With Brandon, if I don't see a corpse, I don't believe that they're dead. And sometimes even when you see a corpse, question.
Oh, yeah. I figured there were some survivors still, but I didn't know that her mother would be alive still.
There had been too much work put into separating this group, having them escape, and I was just like, no, they're gonna. This is a seed that Brandon has planted. This is coming back. Mm-hmm. And so after Kaladin has his awesome moment after they retake Urithiru. Leshui and Vinley and Relaine and this group head off to find their people. Mm-hmm. And it's really, it's just a cool moment where they're reunited. And remember, Vinley did all this stuff initially because, what's her name? Terrace woman.
Axendwith. She told her a name that just rolls off the tongue.
There are Spren bonds that can heal people, and she's like, "Can we heal my mother's dementia, her growing dementia?" Mm-hmm. And
it works.
I was like, "This is just straight up happy ending."
Yes.
Thank you, Brandon, for giving us not bittersweet. It works, and she's happy and healthy and wonderful. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, Relaine. Poor Relaine, who's been waiting so long for a Spren bond. First he wants an honor Spren, but none of them will bond with him. Then, there's the possibility of him bonding with the sibling. No, that's another red herring. Instead, Relaine is bonded with a corrupted mist Spren.
As we all predicted.
As everyone expected. He's going to be, it's going to be Relaine and Renarin.
Yep.
I'm just like...
And they're not even in the same spot, too.
No.
Relaine and Renarin in the not kind of, sort of Truth Watchers, maybe.
Yeah. Like, I was not expecting, we're going to get another Siat-Anat Radiant.
Mm-hmm. So is this... So the Spren that he got was the one that is referenced in... That's supposed to go to Marae's, right? It's that same one, right?
I think so. But there were a few of them, so
yeah,
a lot of them could have been one supposed to go to.
Because I remember, I listened to a reading of the Siat-Anat's interlude, and she sends one out to Marae's, and then she has a couple diversionary ones too. But I think
she sacrifices the wind Spren.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although that turns out to be a ploy to do stuff and get Odium to go to Terravant. Right. It's
yes,
convoluted.
Plans upon plans upon plans, and at a certain point, it's just a knot. It's not a Siat-Anat. Oh my goodness, it's incredible.
It's a Siat cannot.
I did really like her powers and how she found out more about the sibling that way, and like how Urithiru was formed just because of her. I can't remember what they're the stone powers. I don't remember what they're called.
Is it
tension?
tension?
How she can shape.
Cohesion, I believe.
Cohesion. Okay, I can never keep it straight. But seeing that surge binding was really cool. It made me think of Avatar
and like she made those little
figures.
And like this tiny little miniature. Like it was just sort of that was kind of cool.
Well, and then
Okay, guys.
the stones talked back.
I know.
And
Yeah.
they remembered, and that's I don't. There was something weird about that. Just because I don't think of it as like it's been so long, I wouldn't think that that they could remember. You know.
Well, except that they have spren. They have a cognitive aspect.
Yeah,
And
I
stone
just
is a slow changing thing normally, so it would probably hold on to those memories longer versus a stick
Yeah.
only lasts for so long. A stone lasts for a
Stone
Yeah, but
is
the impression of the
conceptually
stick makes
eternal.
is forever.
There's a shirt.
There is a shirt.
Yes.
Okay, can we talk though about one of my favorite parts of the book? There are several parts of this book that are going to make you weep,
Oh,
but Eshonai's epilogue.
It's beautiful.
I feel like this is Brandon saying, Eshonai was done dirty. I need to give her a better ending than fell off a cliff and died.
and her gets her corpse looted by her sister.
It's absolutely beautifully done. First off, we find out Eshonai did become a radiant before she died. Mm-hmm. She was in the chasm floor. The waters were coming and rushing around her, and she can't breathe. And I just love the line from the Stormfather, because the Stormfather comes to her. Well, first off, she hears the rhythm of panic, and she stops herself and she says, "No, not panic, not your rhythms. I reject you. My life, my death. I will be free." Mm-hmm. And those words, my life, my death, life before death. It's
Yep.
sort of the beginning of an oath. And the Stormfather says, "You were radiant when you died. You couldn't say the words under the water, but I accepted them anyway. How do you think you survived that long without breathing?" Because, when you speak an oath, suddenly there's a surge of investiture and you're fully invested. And I love that Eshonai thanks him. And he's just like, "I couldn't prevent this. Maybe I should have done more, but I didn't." And she says, "The rain cannot stop the bloodshed, but it washes the world afterward anyway." Mm-hmm. It's just like, maybe you couldn't stop the bad things from happening, but you were able to start fixing the problems that came from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so gorgeous. Well, then on top of it, because the scene right before that is Dalinar, sort of talking to the Stormfather and being like, "You don't, like, you didn't start caring. You never did this stuff before." And the Stormfather's like, "I did once before," and
Yeah.
and just telling him, like, showing that there has been growth in the Stormfather before Dalinar. It's not all Dalinar. There was
Right.
some mercy to him before. There was some honor to him before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful moment. And it's just like stupid ninjas cutting onions. It's just, the fact that we
I'm not
know
crying,
that
you're crying.
that she got some, what she wanted before she left.
Well, and that's the thing is, what did he give her? What did she always want? She wanted to see what was beyond the next hill. And he showed
And she
her
got to
the
see.
world.
Yep. The whole thing.
He showed her the entire world. Because, again, when she found out the world isn't just the Shattered Plains. The Shattered Plains is a tiny, tiny part of the world. And it just sort of opened up her mind, and suddenly she's just like, well, then I want to see it.
Yeah.
And, she was trapped inside of her own mind for a long time, screaming against it, fighting against it. And in the end, she was still able to reject it.
Yeah.
And so she was finally given at the very end peace. And I love it.
No, it's the other thing that's interesting about Eshonai in retrospect is we do see how, and I wonder if some of this is actually maybe a little bit of Brandon seeping into Eshonai as a character, how she had all these dreams of going off and doing this and all these random things, and then the reality of the situation took away some of her agency to do that. Like, she couldn't do these amazing things while also, doing what she viewed was the more valuable thing in protecting her people. And
Her responsibilities.
Brandon, I mean, look, when Brandon started writing, he was a clerk at a desk at a hotel, and he could just write throughout the night whenever, because no one's really poking him to do anything. And I think he was just barely married to his wife. They didn't have any kids. The responsibility was low.
He wasn't even married yet.
I wasn't even married yet. Okay. I don't know the quite.
No.
I need a Brandon timeline as well as a Cosmere one. And so, he had all these ideas in his head, and he's been hit in recent years. And I think it was probably having to do the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time conclusion, where he realized that, if I want to be able to finish what I want to do, that unfortunately Robert Jordan, who was his, favorite author, he didn't get to finish up his works. And Brandon has suddenly gone into overdrive of planning and organizing, and we need to make this company so that we can handle this. And I think he's trying to squeeze everything he can out of the time he has. And I think there's a little bit of that in Eshonai, where that fear is sort of, shown in her character.
He actually talked about that a bit in, I believe it was the 2019 State of the Sanderson, where he's just like, I'm realizing if I want to get this finished, this is sort of the pace that I'm going. And so that's when he started pulling back on some of the external projects. He's like, I've got to focus on the Cosmere. This is why he started co-authoring stuff with people, they writing it together so that he can focus on his Cosmere stuff to get it out before he's 80 years old.
Yeah.
And he's like, if I want to finish this in my lifetime, I have to follow this pace. And so he's got it plotted out at this point. Like, plotted, when I say plotted, not the stories themselves, but the books that he needs to write and when he needs to write them by. He's laying this out so that he can actually meet these expectations. Rather than, ooh, that's a cool story, I'll write it now. He said he has to be a bit more discerning in what he actually writes. And so I think you may be right. Like, there's a bit of Brandon coming out in Eshonai in that. Mm-hmm. Just to actually...
It's what's the phrase? It's like, you can't let good be the enemy of great or something like that. Or are you going to tell me that's a Bette Midler song too?
Perfect is the enemy of good? Or of great?
Yeah, there's something like that. But I think it's realizing, putting what's important before what's just good. And for Brandon, listen to how deep this conversation is on, this is a freaking book, it's in a fantasy world, but we're getting, help with how do we process, the passing away of loved ones? How do we deal with, our own mental issues? How do we get past our own selfishness? How do we reach out? Like, he tackles insanely difficult things that help us get through hard times. These, like, it's somehow, it's important at the same time. It's, it's a fiction story, and in that it's kind of trivial, but it's still somehow important.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, by having all these different characters and all these different viewpoints, we can understand other people's situations better and get outside of ourselves, and then fully or better understand things that we've struggled with just through all of the different stories and plot lines and characters.
Absolutely. No, I felt like that was the perfect send-off for Eshonai, though.
Oh, absolutely perfect. Well, frankly, when he said, "You'll know the moment when you get to it," I thought that was gonna be the one. Like, after reading it all, like, just because that was such a perfect send off.
It was beautiful.
Her and Teft got just the perfect send off.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Although hers was a little less winked at the way Teft's was.
Well, because she'd already...
Yeah, died.
She'd already died.
Yeah.
She died 2 books ago. And so him giving her that... And because of that, I'm glad that he did decide to do the flashbacks for both Venli and Eshonai. Because Venli is the first Willshaper that we know of. But Eshonai was the first Willshaper. Because she before she died, she became radiant. Yeah. Very briefly. But and so it was just it really does sort of belong to both of them. Mm-hmm. And if it had been just Venli, I feel like we would have missed out on just this amazing scene.
Yeah.
All right.
The other thing I wanted to mention with Venli that was because her struggle was realizing she actually is going to have to take a stand here when she has been doing everything she can to just sort of not.
To coast, yeah.
Yeah. And, well, it's just because she had all these grand ideas, and then as soon as the actual conflict came, she always wilted under it. Right. Even when it was her evil plans. As soon as conflict came, she would wilt. She'd hide by the rock in the middle of the Everstorm. She, sort of, when she got confronted by those guards, she just sort of, did what she was told and didn't confront anyone in that one flashback when she was in Kolinar and stuff.
Right.
And she was just so averse to the actual conflict of, she wanted to be great, but she wasn't willing to take the steps to be a great person. Either terrible, if both her evil plans, or like a good person when she was starting to turn around. And yeah, and so she finally learns to take that step, and I love that Relaine is the one who sort of just it's like and she views Relaine as he's so human because at this point he's been with the humans for how many years at that point.
He's got a lot of their mannerisms.
Yeah, and he's so emotional about it. And he finally moves her to do something. And she goes and saves Lift. And the thing I like about it is she still takes the backdoor option. It's still her trying to do it in a way she won't get caught because she's not good with confrontation. But she finally took that first step. And it's after that first step she's able to tell Leshwi, because she's finally taken that step to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like Venli would have made a good Lightweaver.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But again, there are people who could be in multiple different, and she's a Willshaper. All right. Now, guys, we've got a question from a fan this week that I am excited about.
No.
So this time we got a question from a listener who goes by Squish. She says, or they say, she says, I don't know. Squish says, I'm a newer listener to your podcast, and I've been making my way through the archives. I was listening to episode number 23, and at the end, you guys were discussing the significance of various flutes in the Cosmere, specifically the flute Hoyd gives to Cal and Amaram's collection. In light of what we're learning about investiture and rhythm of war, do you think this explains the use of flutes by the Sons of Honor, as well as how Gavilar procured the sphere of anti-Stormlight? I think this is a brilliant insight.
It's very possible. I mean, we don't know all the details still, and I'm sure when we get Gavilar's background or scene,
his flashback, his prologue.
Flashback, yeah. There's words. The flashback. That's gonna hopefully answer some more of the questions, but that is interesting, and I hadn't thought about that.
It would make sense that this is how they would get back to because there had been musical aspects, and so it makes sense why Amaram might be collecting some sort of musical instruments, because music is so tied to investiture on this planet.
Yeah.
I for some reason I didn't think about this at all.
I didn't either, but
until there's lots of things to think about.
Yeah, well, but it brings up a question that I'm sort of like, wait, why didn't I ask this before? So we know that Gavilar it was anti-void light, right?
I believe.
No, I think it was anti-Stormlight, because
it's one of the two. It's anti-light of some kind. Light. It's clearly anti-light. And we know that they had it. So clearly someone in the Sons of Honor somehow discovered the same trick that Navani did. Why don't they have more?
I almost wonder if they didn't have somebody who was quite so scientific, so it was a fluke accident, and they couldn't quite get it just right. Like, they weren't documenting it well enough, and so they got a couple of them or something, and then they couldn't get it just right again.
We know that Gavilar had several spheres of this stuff.
Yeah.
So
maybe they
may not
do.
Have had,
Yeah.
Maybe they might have.
We know the Sons of Honor have been basically wiped out at this point. You would think,
but they
would have traded these secrets for.
They may
some
have
safety.
been taken too. I mean, there are other groups like the Ghost Bloods.
Yeah,
who very well could be like, I'm going to take that.
Restaris is still out there, so
yeah. I don't know. I just feel like this is such a valuable secret. Why didn't they? Why didn't they use it to prevent themselves from going? The other thing is, it could be what Amy says, and then it's sort of the explanation of, well, wait a minute. They invented Captain America in the 1940s. Why weren't there, a bunch of others?
A whole army of them, yeah.
Uh,
And it's like, oh well, it turns out the German doctor who did this took horrible notes, and when it was all said and done, he died. They couldn't recreate it because his notes were just so bad.
It also could
documentation. Yeah.
It also could have been a matter of, we don't want this to, the Ghost Bloods are after us. We don't want them to get their hands on this. Let's keep this away from the Lord of Scars, because that could be very, very scary.
He's not interested in that. He just wants to get off world.
We don't know what he wants right now.
Yeah.
What he wants is to be very interesting. Because that's what he is. He's Kelsier, the most interesting man in the Cosmere.
Yeah, who knows?
I do not always kill gods, but when I do, I prefer them to be evil.
Well, we love hearing from our listeners, so if you have questions, keep sending them in. You can ask us about the Cosmere. You can drop us your ideas for topics that you would like for us to discuss during the show. And while you're at it, we'd love to hear your feedback about how you think we're doing, as well as any interesting theories you might have about what's going on in the Cosmere. You can send all questions and suggestions in a brief, concise email to cosmerestudies@gmail.com, and hopefully we'll read your question as part of the show. If you prefer to send us a physical letter, we do have a P.O. Box at the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, P.O. Box 970063, Orem, Utah 84097. We do have our own personal projects outside of this podcast, so Jordan, why don't you get us started off this week and let us know what you are up to these days?
Today was a crazy day. Just launched the Professional Amiibo League's 4th season. If you're interested in what true competitive Amiibo looks like, you should definitely come check us out. We have $425 in prizes. If you have Amiibo, you can still participate. There's going to be a second qualifier, so you might want to come visit and ask about that, because money's money, and I enjoy having it. Then the other thing is, I just started recording for my new YouTube series I'll be doing. It's sort of a throwback to a series I used to do. I do XCOM, which is a frustrating game full of randomness and bugs, and it's glorious, and we're going to stop the alien invasion. The series is going to be called Tales from the Infirmary. And so just go follow me.
What a great title.
Yeah, I don't know what some hero came up with it. I don't know who, but no, I'm looking forward to it. After doing my first 4 missions, it's already proving to be very XCOM.
Awesome. Amy, how about you? What are you doing these days?
So my Facebook is Coincidence Cosplay and Props. My Twitter is @CoincidenceCosp, because my name is too long. My Instagram is @coincidence_cosplay, and I have 2 websites. I have an Etsy, and I have just my normal website, which is www.coincidencecosplay.com, and my Etsy shop is etsy.com/shop/coincidencecosplay. And my husband has a website, which is deckplan.io, if you want to look into Magic the Gathering cards and all deck planning and deck sharing and such and so forth.
Cool.
But I am making dice for our local gaming store. I am going to start actually working on my armor, but that's probably going to be really slow progress. That's from the Mandalorian series. And I'm going
like
to make
Mandalorian
my
armor?
children... Yes, like the armorer who goes and smacks down a bunch of
right.
stormtroopers.
Nice. I
Nice.
forgot that character.
They call her the armorer because they don't have a name that
because she makes armor.
I have
the
always
armorer.
had the hardest time saying armorer.
Armorer.
Exactly. You sound like
anyway,
a dog
and
at a certain point.
And I'm gonna be doing. I promised my children months and months ago that I would make them Pokemon plush. So I'm gonna make a Haunter and a Noibat, if you happen to know what that is. So
I don't know a Noibat.
yes.
Is that a new one?
It's a dragon / something else bat. Anyway, it's a
Dragon
bat thing.
bats?
It's like dragon and something else kind Pokemon.
Sounds like something from the Avatar universe.
It's weird. Like I've lost track of all the kinds of Pokemon, and I should know them better since my children have watched the shows a billion
everything
times.
after
but it's still-
151 is a Digimon, as far as I'm concerned.
it's so hard to keep track of them. It's hard. So that's what my crazy life is. That and trying to take it easy on my wrist. Because
Our next 1-star review is going
I
to be some
work it too
Pokemon
hard.
fan. Just like, what? 151? They don't know a Noibat? What's wrong with these people?
Come on. So
man.
yes.
And as for myself, I have got another podcast with my friend Dylan. We talk about board games, and it's great. It's called The Innkeeper's Table, and we have new episodes on Friday mornings. You can get it on pretty much any of the major podcast apps. So go ahead and listen to us there. You can also check out our Instagram page at Innkeeper's Table Podcast. We did recently introduce a new format, how we're going to be releasing episodes. And so, we're going to have a series where we talk about, I enjoyed X. What should I play next? And then we're going to feature a specific game. Then we're going to feature the next week. We'll feature a game mechanic. Third week we'll feature a game specifically, and then we'll have sort of grab bag stuff. And so last week, our last episode, we talked about the Spiel des Jahres. You heard me correctly. It's German for Game of the Year. That's the highest award in board gaming, which was won by a lot of the games that people who aren't really even into board gaming know about. Games like Catan, Ticket to Ride, Dominion, that kind of stuff.
I was shocked when you told me Rummikub had won it.
Rummikub won it in 1980, so it was the second year that the award existed. And then this upcoming episode is another installment in the I Enjoyed X, What Should I Play Next series, where we recommend games based on the games that you may have previously enjoyed. This time we're talking about games for people who liked the old classic mystery game Clue, or if you're outside of North America, Cluedo. I also have several board game. In other countries they call it Cluedo.
I had no idea.
It was made in England. It was originally called Cluedo. We're the ones who are doing things differently.
Cosmere.
I don't know. And it got is the movie called Cluedo outside of America? I have so many questions.
Probably not.
I don't know. I
International
think the movie's
people,
just Clue.
Tell us.
I'm gonna have to go find out. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. I do have other board game reviews over at www.innkeeperstable.com, and I post about games on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the profile at Innkeeper's Table. For those of you who want to support the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, but you cannot become patrons, we would love it if you just let your friends know about the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, or to like and subscribe over on youtube.com/Cosmere Studies. And if you want to toss us a good review wherever you listen to us, we would appreciate that too. Any final thoughts on this Venli Eshonai arc before we sign off for the night?
It'd be so cool if I could actually cosplay them, but I think that's scary with prosthetics. So I don't know that that's ever going to happen.
That could
But
be
that's my
interesting.
random.
I
I
mean-
know, because I'd have to. There'd be so much involved. So much. I think Lynn is far more accessible.
Yeah, it's
I can
cloth
use my
that
own
turns-
hair.
Yeah. It's man, I just really liked getting to see, like, even though her parts of the story weren't exactly the most exciting, because, we have the McLean
easy.
chapters over here, we have Navani solving mysteries of the universe over here. Her struggles seem so mundane, but there's a certain piece to that Brandon doesn't forget that the mundane struggles matter in these books.
Indeed. Oh, no, it's just... it adds context to, I feel like, an underappreciated section of the books. You know, we get a lot of context on the listener culture before the humans arrived. We get a lot of context on who Eshonai grew from, who she, where she came from, where Venli came from, what led Venli to do the things that she did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the other thing is I guess I expected them to be more alien, but I guess that's another Brandon-ism, is to find out how much more alike people are than they were.
Then they are different, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It was fun seeing Venli come out of her shell.
Oh, man. All right. Well, in addition to the live episodes of the show that stream on twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table every 2 weeks, on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, listeners can find our videos on YouTube or audio versions of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and just about any other service that carries podcasts by searching for Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the profile @Cosmere Studies. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions for the show, email them to cosmerestudies@gmail.com. For our next episode, we'll be wrapping up the major storylines from Rhythm of War, and this one is a doozy. None of them really get a whole lot of screen time in this book, but we're going to be discussing everything that goes on with Dalinar, Zeth, and Taravangian. You really won't want to miss this one, so join us for the live recording in 2 weeks on February 15th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time at 10:30 p.m. Eastern at www.twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table. Until then, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember, there's always
There's always
another
another
secret.
secret.